Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Leadership Project, where our vision is to inspire all leaders to challenge the status quo. Today, we bring you another thought-provoking guest. We're honored to be joined by Corey Patrick White. Corey is a technologist, a writer, and a speaker with a great repertoire of speaking gigs, including a recent gig at TEDx where he spoke about algorithmic bias, which really caught my attention. Corey is also a partner and senior vice president at Future Point of View, where he helps leaders look into the future and anticipate how technology will impact their organizations and impact themselves. He's also very active in the community as a board member with an organization called Oklahoma Messaging Project, as a young professionals founding member with an organization called A Chance to Change, and a conference organizer for a really interesting organization called Stronger Together. And we're most likely going to talk about each elements of those different community activities that Corey does as we go through the interview. So, Corey, please say hello to our audience and tell us a little bit more about your background.
I'm absolutely delighted to be on the show, and thank you for reaching out and connecting with me. And I'm just excited for this conversation, excited to get to do this. So I appreciate it, and I'm very grateful.
Excellent. We're so happy to have you here, Corey, and I know that the audience is going to get a lot out of this today. Can you tell us a little bit more about your background that led you to where you are today and led to us having you on the show here today?
Yeah, I'm from Colorado originally, and I started my career at television news. I was a broadcast news. I went to the University of Colorado at Boulder and got my journalism degree. Spent 4 years as the sports anchor reporter, and the last 2 years as the sports director at the ABC affiliate in Casper, Wyoming. Had a really, really good time. It was a really challenging but interesting time to be in television, with the transformation going on in TV. Got out of TV and then ended up, a guy I worked with in television recommended me for this position up here at Future Point of View. So I was in Texas at the time, and we're based in Oklahoma City. So I came up here, and I've been here for, I think, 6 years, and just worked my way up and found a real passion for this, for helping leaders navigate this important time, this digital transformation, and especially now in the last year and a half with social distancing and COVID, and how technology has become just so critical in our lives. But I've also a passion for cybersecurity as well. So, my boss, who we may talk about, Scott Klosowski, we call him the digital optimist. In many ways, I'm the digital pessimist in some ways. I have a little bit of a darker view on technology sometimes in the way it impacts our lives. I like to be a positive person, but I also like to look at it not in rose-colored glasses, and that's maybe one of the reasons why that led me to do the TEDx talk on algorithmic bias.
That's an interesting balance there between you and the founder, where the founder is quite optimistic about everything that we can do with technology, and then you're a little bit more pessimistic about it and go, well, yes, but we need to stop and think potentially about maybe some of the ethical elements of using that technology in the way that we will use it today and in the future. I think that will underpin a little bit of our conversation today. Tell us more about that transition from journalist into this. How did you go from journalist to futurist?
Well, I kind of fell into it backwards. Like I said, I was just recommended by a friend to this position. I really wasn't a technologist. I could use a laptop, but I don't have a coding background. I don't have that software development background. But I am a ferocious learner. I am a ferocious reader. I always have a podcast on. And so I just learned. I learned, and it took me a few years, and I'm still learning. But it's constantly learning, and that's what I tell people, who when maybe they're struggling and just because you went to college and you got a humanities degree doesn't mean you have to do humanities throughout your life. Today, if we are constantly shifting, we're constantly moving, unless you go and you be a doctor or and you get a specialized degree like that. But for the most of us, our careers are going to take a really winding path, and so that's what I tell leaders, is that you just have to look out for those opportunities and always constantly be learning and growing your knowledge.
There's certainly nothing more certain in today's age that change is with us, and it's with us all the time.
Mhm.
I don't think many of us would have predicted the phenomena that TikTok has become, and that's just skyrocketed. And before that, it was the likes of WeChat. We thought that was the fastest growing that we would ever see a company, and now TikTok has probably exceeded that. So the world is certainly changing at an increasing pace.
And the way we use these digital tools, the information we put out there, how everything is done online these days. I mean, from the people we meet to date, to how we celebrate our joys, to how we celebrate our losses. When your mom dies, what is the first thing you're going to do is you're going to grieve, and a lot of times you're grieving with your network through social media. So it becomes our outlet to share joys, to share pains, to share relationships, and it has just overcome everything in our lives. And it is great in the fact that it allows us to connect. Mick, you and I can connect. You're in Singapore, I'm in Oklahoma, and we can have this conversation. And a lot of that happened because of these digital tools. You saw me maybe on the YouTube, and then you reached out to me on LinkedIn, and then we were able to connect via email, and now we're doing this over Zoom. These are all these great tools, but we also have to find that balance, right, of how we use technology versus sometimes we use it too much. And you get the classic example of the four kids sitting around a room, and they're all looking at their smartphones, or there's a family at dinner and everybody's looking at their phones. So you have to find that right balance, and that it's health. And we're starting to see a lot of mental health issues as well with technology, and we're going to see more of that as people get overwhelmed by it. So a lot of it, and I think we're going to talk about this, is going to be training young people on how we find that balance of, don't use technology, use it well, but don't use it to where it's going to hurt your mental health.
There's no doubt that there is some virtuous power that comes with it. And the fact that you and I are connecting and having this conversation is part of that. I've also recently been connecting with people that I haven't met or seen for 20 plus years, and we're able to find each other again because of these technologies. And there's elements of it that are just wonderful. I've got I've got family that live in Australia. This is how I regularly are in contact with them, with video calls, seeing what they're updating on Facebook and Instagram. There's so many wonderful things. But we
wouldn't have survived the pandemic without teleconferencing. Most of us use Zoom. I don't want to say just Zoom, but it was kind of the overwhelming favorite for people and with teleconferencing. But I mean, that was a godsend, because we wouldn't have gotten through this pandemic without these tools.
There's no doubt about that at all, I think, Corey. Then you're bringing up some of the dangers, and I want to touch on the one that you've already raised, and that's around mental health. Tell us more about your concerns for mental health in this digital age.
We're not designed, our bodies, our brains are not designed to ingest the amount of content that we ingest on a daily basis. When you talk about like a TikTok, and you're scrolling through all these videos, our brains are not physically adjusted yet for that. We haven't, we're not meant to do that. We're not meant, we talked before this, Mick, about, having kind of Zoom fatigue during the pandemic, and that you're sitting in front of a screen all day for 8 hours, and you get home and you're just exhausted in a way that you weren't exhausted before, when you could have physical in-person meetings. We're not designed. And so we're going to have these issues, and we need to deal with them. We need to, in many ways, that's going to be a mental health crisis in the way that in some ways, addiction, gambling, are, for us, it's technology. And you look at like a social media, these apps like Facebook and a Twitter and a TikTok, they're designed like slot machines. They're designed to hook you and to attract you and to make you stay and to continue to use the app. And in many ways, just like with a gambler, you can become addicted and you can become overwhelmed and it could harm your life. In the same way, these social media or social technology apps can harm your life as well if you get overwhelmed by them and you overuse them.
There's a few things to unpack there, Corey. I'm hearing two things. One is about the Zoom fatigue. And for me, that is very real. And I think 8 hours was an understatement for many people in our audience. It's 8+, can be 12+, it can be 16 hours sitting in front of Zoom calls with not as
and you're looking at yourself in the camera too. So it's if not it just meant, but you're looking at yourself and you're saying, look at the bags underneath my eyes. Like, why do I look so tired? And that causes mental anguish too, because you're like, I don't like the way I look. I don't like my appearance, but I got to sit here and stare at it for 16 hours a day.
And there's some element with a Zoom meeting where you are jumping from one meeting to another meeting and you're just going from 100% focus to 100% focus to 100% focus. There's no longer that get up and walk to the coffee machine and have a general chit chat, a social collision with someone in the office. It's just going from one meeting to another and you don't have that outlet, that breathing space. And quite often these meetings can even overlap. And I think even the founder of Zoom has admitted that Zoom fatigue is actually something real and something leaders need to think about.
We counseled our clients to when you had to have those meetings and you couldn't have an in-person meeting. Today, you can, depending on where you're at, you can go back to in-person meetings. But we counseled them that you have to also have those, like maybe a meeting that's fun, where you don't talk about work. You get together as a group, or maybe it's a department. If you're in a large organization, if you're in a small organization like ours, it would be the whole company. And we'd get together and we'd maybe have a show and tell where you'd pick something in your office and you tell a story about that. Or maybe you get to talk about your life, because that is so important, because you're like you said, you don't have those little interactions at the coffee maker where you get to go, hey, how was Billy's baseball game yesterday? Or how's your mom? I know she's struggling with, some cancer issues. You don't have that with these Zoom meetings where it's meeting to meeting to meeting and it's all business.
Yeah, I agree. Fully agree. And I think we can do better as leaders to see if we can create those environments where we're making the most of the situation, use the technology to its advantage, but also be very human about it. The other one that you picked up on was then on the social media element of it. And I want to come back to the mental health one. I'll put an opinion to you. I'd like your reflections on this. The other part of the social media and the mental health aspect is the issue of comparison. And what I want to say to our audience is that when you see someone's Instagram feed, you are seeing what they want you to see. That is a curated version of their life. And I think the danger of that, with some exceptions, I think there are some very natural people in social media. With some exceptions, people are portraying the person that they want to be, the person that they want to aspire to be, or the way that they want you to see them. And it's not necessarily real life. And then, particularly with young, impressionable people, it sets a new standard, a new expectation of comparing themselves to that person that they see on Instagram, that influencer, and start comparing themselves, not necessarily in a favorable light. Any thoughts on that from your perspective, Corey?
I mean, I think it's entirely legitimate. You're seeing kids who are wanting plastic surgery to look like an Instagram filter. They're taking the picture of themselves with the filter to the plastic surgeon and saying, "Make me look like this." You have men who typically don't usually struggle less with identity issues. Again, that's stereotyping, but again, typically men struggle less than women do with that. But you have men who are reaching out and saying, let me have plastic surgery, get me the chiseled jaw, because I want to look like that. I- these are young, healthy, attractive, people, but they just want to be more attractive. They want to look more like you said, that influencer that is out there that they're following, and yeah, the vacations, going to the beautiful spaces, but you're not seeing the loneliness that's in their lives, the sadness. You don't see that, and a lot of those influencers they do deal with mental health issues, and you see that when they come out and they say, "Yeah, I'm struggling.
Mm.
I'm struggling." So, I mean, that is the thing of comparison is absolutely legitimate and real.
I think there's something there for us all to think about, and maybe spread that message to make sure that people are realizing that's just entertainment. That's not real life. That's entertainment. And to make sure that we avoid those comparisons and feeling that we're lesser than we should be because of something that we've seen that's quite artificial in terms of what we see there.
Mhm.
The other part that you picked up on, and this is how I found you in the first place, Corey, was about the algorithm and about the addictiveness. And we'll get to the other part of the algorithm in a moment around bias. One thing about these social media tools is they are designed to be addictive on purpose. They're looking for eyeballs. They generate revenue by your watch time, by the amount of time that you spend immersed in their environment. That's how they generate their advertising revenue. That's how they generate everything. So then their algorithms within any of these tools, and I'm not going to pick on any of them individually because they all do it. The algorithm is designed to give favorable treatment to content that has stickiness, that keeps you in that environment. So if someone produces a bit of content that then leads on to a desire to click again and then click again, it might have a part 1, a part 2, a part 3, or at the very end of a YouTube video, it's suggesting the next video, and you're clicking and you're staying in that environment for an extended period of time. The algorithm actually favors that. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah. There's two things there. I think the first part where you talk about you want to see more con the algorithm is seeking content that is more edgy. So you have, when you talk about the mental health aspect, you have kids these days who, in order to get more shares and more likes and more follows, are doing more and more dangerous things, because that's what the videos that are going to get liked are going to get shared, are going to get where they're going to gain more followers. You talk about like the Tide Pod challenge, and I think there's a thing going around now, and I'm maybe on TikTok, but don't hold me to it, but where the kids are asphyxiating themselves. I mean, this is dangerous stuff, but it's because in many ways these algorithms are enticing kids to do more dangerous things. They're enticing young girls to wear more provocative clothing, because that's what the algorithm is going to go. That's what everybody wants to see. So I'm going to promote that post. Therefore, they get that, and they get that dopamine hit of like, oh man, people are sharing this. People are liking this. I've got to do more of this. I've got to do more of this. And the other aspect is make the echo chamber, the rabbit hole and the echo chamber, which we can elaborate more on. But the rabbit hole of where the algorithm, the famous example is YouTube, where maybe a kid is researching the Holocaust for school, and so he goes to YouTube because that's where kids get all their information these days, is YouTube. So he goes to YouTube and he sees two videos. One says, here's the Holocaust. Let me give you a oral history of the Holocaust. The other video says the Holocaust never happened. Which video is that kid likely to click on? He's more likely to click on the Holocaust never happened because it's more interesting. It's like, what? Were my teachers wrong? What is this? And then the algorithm starts feeding that kid more of that content that says, the Holocaust didn't happen, this and this and this, and you go down that rabbit hole, and then all of a sudden, this kid truly believes that the Holocaust was a farce. So that is, that's one of the ways the echo chambers occur, and of course, the other way is you get caught up in the echo chamber of I only want to read content of a certain political ideology that I whether that be in America, it would be Republican or Democrat. So I'm only reading that content. Well, the algorithm is saying, well, if he only wants to read that content, that's the only content I'm going to feed him. So therefore, that's all the content he's going to see. Therefore, he sees no dissenting opinions, no dissenting news, no dissenting viewpoints, and therefore that reinforces his belief that he is righteous and everybody else isn't.
So I'm hearing two things there again, Corey, and the second one is the bias element. And I think we need to get to that in a moment, because that's, once again, that was your TEDx talk that really got my attention. The other thing that you said just a few minutes ago, I don't want to lose it, so I'll take a backtrack for a second. You mentioned about the dopamine hit. And that dopamine hit happens in both directions. It's the social media creator who's watching their views tick up and tick up and tick up. And it's also the consumer is also getting an entertainment-driven, pleasure-driven dopamine hit. And the interesting thing there that I'm watching with great interest is that, of course, any kind of pleasure-associated joy in the brain has a shorter and shorter half-life as you go on. And that's what is also fueling some of this addiction. And that's why I used the term before, the 3-second world, because of the likes of TikTok. People are needing to consume more and more of it to get the same level of pleasure that what they were previously getting. So it's that snowballing effect. Any reflection on that kind of pleasure cycle?
I hadn't thought about it, but you're absolutely right that, it's just like that first cigarette always tastes a lot better than the 30th cigarette, or the first beer is a lot better than the 16th. Is, you're that dopamine, you need more, the addict needs more to feed the fix. And I mean, that is a great point. And maybe one of the reasons I'd never thought about it is like a TikTok rises because you can consume so much more content so quickly. Whereas, with the YouTube, it's a long form, but with the TikTok, it's 15 seconds or whatever. And then, Twitter, it's 140 characters. So maybe there is something to that, a correlation, which I had never thought about, between that dopamine hit and the fact that this content is becoming shorter and shorter and easier to consume.
I think it's spot on, and I think that's exactly what's fueling some of this. Is that pleasure cycle is so short, and just means that we need more and more of it, and we need a way for people to talk about social media detox. I think people, that needs to be part of our world right now. People need to take a break from time to time. By all means, consume it, go back and use it for its virtuous natures that we spoke about, but maybe think about some of these detox periods where you do take a break from it so that you can reset. Otherwise, it is going to keep on spiraling like that.
And you don't need to tell everyone on Facebook that you're going to take a social media detox. You could just do it. You don't have to announce it to the world. You could just go do it. It doesn't need that. You mentioned a chance to change earlier, and I'm on the Young Professionals Board there. It's an addiction recovery mental health center here in Oklahoma City. And we chat about this, is they're getting more and more phone calls about young people, especially during this pandemic. More and more young people are having these mental health crises. And a lot of that is, social media. And it was fueled by the fact it already was there with social media, but then now they don't have school. They're not hanging out with their friends at school. They're on Zoom school. And then, they're not hanging out with their friends in the afternoons and going to sports. Maybe they, play football, basketball, tennis, whatever, cheerleading. they're not doing that. And so they're stuck at their house and, with nothing to do. So they're scrolling through social media, and it's causing that problem where they're on it more and more. And that screen time just increases and increases, and the mental health deteriorates.
That's a good point. I'd like to know more about a chance to change. We might come back to that towards the end of the podcast as well. Let's get back to the algorithm then, and the subject of bias. And this is the first time I'll mention, but I'm sure not the last time, to our audience, that everyone should catch Corey's TEDx talk on this. It's quite provocative and really makes you stop and think. And we'll talk about it a little bit more now. So let's start with, what does Harry Potter have to do with algorithmic bias?
Oh, you're going to bring me back. Are you a Harry Potter fan?
I am.
Okay.
My wife particularly so, but yes, I am.
Yeah. This actually was not, I was inspired by my friend David, who actually is one of the TEDx organizers. So I cannot take credit for this. He came up with this idea and I ran with it. But the Imperious Curse, in Harry Potter, it lulls the victim into a false sense of tranquility. So they have no feelings of responsibility. Everything's been removed, and they have no idea they're under this curse. They feel that sense of tranquility, that just peace. And in many ways today, we are under a similar type curse like that, with these algorithms, because they are manipulating us in ways we don't even understand, and we don't see it. And yet we're totally contented by it.
Really interesting. I've got to stick up my hand here and say that digital marketing is a big part of what I do in my day job. So I do use this, but I strongly believe that I use it for ethical reasons and to help people to find the right information that will help them, right? So for altruistic reasons. But you can imagine the power of this when used for non-altruistic reasons or for unethical reasons is quite mind-boggling. So let's talk now about going into that and talking about bias. And you spoke before about going down a rabbit hole. Let's come back to that. And can you give some more color as to why you think that's dangerous?
Well, I think it's dangerous for a number of reasons. The echo chamber is dangerous because when you only see the viewpoints that you agree with, you can't grow, you can't mature, you can't grow. There's obviously the disinformation as well when you talk about the rabbit hole, and that you kids are more likely, and adults, not even just kids, adults, all of us are more likely to consume and share disinformation, because these algorithms are promoting these disinformation because the videos can be so compelling. But so there's that type of aspect as well. But what I was going to say is that these algorithms and these social media companies, it's really easy to to just kind of say, oh, they're terrible, it's all their fault. They built something, and it's not like anybody knew could have anticipated what occurred to the extent that it occurred. There was nobody up there in Mountain View in Silicon Valley going, I want this to happen, I want all of this bad stuff to happen. It just occurred because the algorithms, as we talked about, were designed first to make money. And then secondly, the mission in mind, maybe the mission, maybe Facebook was, well, I want to connect the world, let's just use Facebook. But also it's, I want to make money. I want to connect the world, but I also want to make lots of money. So they weren't designed like that, or they weren't designed for evil in mind. But I tell this anecdote is the Daily, Jack Dorsey from Twitter was on the Daily, and the New York Times daily podcast, and Michael Barbaro, the host, asked him, if you could go back and build Twitter again, what would you change? What would you do differently? And he said, I would hire an ethicist. I would have hired an ethicist. They had no thought about the ethics of what they were doing. They didn't put any thought to that. They just moved fast and break things, and they moved fast and they broke things.
That's really interesting. And I do agree with you, by the way. I don't think there was any malintent intended. And yeah, Facebook.
So, except for the making money aspect. I mean, you could call that a malintent, but I think, I live here in America, and we are a consumer society. We're driven by consumerism, and we're driven by, in many ways, by money. So in that regard, it wasn't evil. But of course, the fact that they were trying to use this in many ways to get money, you could argue that was kind of an evil aspect of it.
Yeah, fair enough. But at the heart of it, the vision. So Facebook connecting people, Google want to making sense of the world's data. In fact, Google's tagline is "Don't be evil." In their tagline, not to be evil.
There would be, I think, a few Google employees who might kind of roll their eyes at that, but from some of the stories you hear coming out. But although I've never worked at Google, nor have I really know any Google employees or have close interactions with them.
Sure. Okay. So let's put it to benefit of the doubt that it was not intended to end up like this way at all. I believe, but certainly the power of it has become very quickly evident. Now, since listening to your talk, I've been thinking about it at two different levels, and I want to test this with you and see what you think. The first one is on the personal level and what the algorithm does, particularly when I look at things like TikTok. The TikTok algorithm learns the individual's preferences quicker than anything I've seen. It's just unbelievable. If I pause on TikTok videos that are about leadership, for example, and I flick past other videos very quickly, all of a sudden, everything that's presented to me is about leadership, and I end up watching things about Simon Sinek and all kinds of things, right? So it learns my preferences super fast. So let's start at that level first. Would you say that leads itself to confirmation bias?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's giving you, again, that echo chamber of we want exactly what we want. So I want the content that, because we're all human, we don't necessarily want to hear competing viewpoints. We want reinforcement of our beliefs that we're righteous and that what we believe is true. We're not designed to want contrarian views, because contrarian views make us uncomfortable. We're designed to stay in our comfort zones, and I think that's reinforcing our beliefs. We want somebody. We all have egos. Oh, you're perfect. You're pretty. You're right. You're so smart. And maybe social media, that's just reinforcing that ego. When you talk about the dopamine hit of getting a lot of likes, it's oh, people like me. That's feeding that ego of, I post a picture of myself, in a bathing suit, and I get a ton of likes. It's that ego of, oh, people think I'm beautiful. I shared my TEDx talk to Facebook on my personal Facebook account yesterday or the day before, and I get all these people saying, "Oh my God, it was so fantastic! Congratulations, you're awesome." How is that not feeding my ego? That is feeding my ego, and it's confirming that I am great. And in many ways, the echo chamber is doing that as well, as saying, I am righteous, I am correct. And the algorithm's just, hey, yeah, you are correct. You are correct. It's kind of silently telling you, yeah, you're correct.
So quick summary for our audience to clarify what we're talking about here. So confirmation bias is when you only see or remember the things that confirm what you already knew or have confirmed your beliefs. So you can imagine that confirmation bias existed well before any of these algorithms, right? So the idea here is kind of things like a gambler who has lucky streaks whenever they wear pink socks. So they only ever wear pink socks when they go to the casino. But what confirmation bias does is that gambler only remembers the times that they won wearing pink socks, and they don't remember the times that they didn't win. That's what confirmation bias is. And you already had that in your brain well before any of these algorithms existed. Now listen to what Corey is saying. Now imagine that there's this algorithm that is feeding your social media to you, and only feeding things that you've either liked before or that you hovered over for longer than other content, it's just going to feed it even more. So now you've got a technological enhancement of something that your brain was already wired to do. Is that a fair?
Mm-hmm. And I like the, the idea of, when you're talking about TikTok and leadership, I'm the same way on Instagram. I'll stop at a cute dog post, and now I've got 4 or 5 dog things, cute dog, or Office and Friends. They for some reason desire that I love the Office and Friends memes. I like those shows or posts. But it works because those are kind of cute and fun and innocent, and leadership stuff is important. It's informative. It's helping you be better at what you do. But then there's that other stuff, the stuff where this gets me angry. This article makes me angry. Therefore, I read it because I click on it because the headline makes me angry. And then it feeds me more anger, and then more articles like that, and more articles like that, and more articles like that. And I'm just getting madder and madder and madder and madder and madder until I'm so mad that I want to go, I don't know, storm the Capitol, whatever, just to do an example. It's feeding the anger and the fury and the divisiveness in at least in America, and I know elsewhere as well. And I'm obviously talking from an American perspective, but that's where that confirmation bias, it emotionally charges you in any way, whether it's to placate you with cute puppy videos or to make you angry about some divisive political issue, that really consumes you and frustrates you and upsets you. And I think we need to learn as a society to shut that off, because these social media companies, they could tweak the algorithms and, they're going to work on that. But for the individual, it's like you have to recognize when you're seeing that stuff. It's like, for me, when COVID hit, I said, I love podcasts. I'm always listening to podcasts. But if that podcast included the word COVID or coronavirus or pandemic or whatever, it was swipe left. I was deleting that thing. I was not listening to that thing because I understood there's nothing I could do to control this. And this is only going to make me upset. It's only going to make me sad. It's only going to make me furious or scared. It's only going to make me in some emotional way extreme. So I have to learn to just turn off that noise. And we all have to learn that. If this thing is making me upset, I have to understand why. And then maybe I have to remove it from my life.
I'm hearing a few things there, Corey. So one is that the algorithm, it could be a virtuous cycle. It could be feeding you things that are virtuous and pleasing to see, etc. Or it can be a spiral. And, if you're, like you say, if you're consuming a lot of negative material that, like you said, makes you angry, it could end up being a amplification of that spiral and maybe an acceleration of that spiral.
And not all algorithms are bad. You found my TEDx talk because of an algorithm, Mick. I mean, that's a solid algorithm right there. So they're not all bad, and they can be designed to be really great because they can feed us content quickly. Like I'll get newsletters, that are of curated technology content. Those are algorithms who are digging into those content, saying these are articles, Corey's going to want to read. And that's great because it improves my IQ, and I can do so really, really quickly. But again, they could also be designed in that way where if it's designed to attract you and give you only what you want, it's great when it comes to newsletters, but it may not be so great when it comes to those new accommodations of where are those public spaces, the new public spaces, which are the social media companies. Those are our new public squares. And when we're only hearing information in those public squares about things that we agree with, that ruins debate, and not having debate is never. We need healthy debate in this world today.
So I need to compliment you on something on your TEDx talk. I thought this was super clever. And once again, for the audience at home, please watch it. You won't regret it at all. But there was this sensational meta conversation that Corey almost starts with in his talk, where he says, everyone in this room is probably in this room because an algorithm led them here today, because they were fed content that said to them, hey, you're probably going to find this interesting. And hey, anyone listening at home or watching at home on YouTube, you're probably watching this YouTube because an algorithm fed this to you. So it was almost like this meta situation where you were saying that the algorithm has led you here, and I'm here to talk to you about the algorithm that led you here. It was really kind of interesting.
Yeah, I was gonna say I missed a joke there. I missed an opportunity. Sometimes you miss those things. I was gonna say, so now that's proof that not all algorithms are bad. But I just you know, your head is going a mile a minute, and I left that out. So there's a little behind the scenes from the TED Talk,
Look,
TEDx talk, I should say.
Your presentation and your talk is amazing. You should be very proud of it. The other part that you touched on there is something that's near and dear to our heart. And if you look at the values and beliefs of the Leadership Project, the first one is about challenging the status quo. The second one is diversity of thought. That worries me. All right. So I purposely go out of my way to look for diverse viewpoints. And it does worry me what you're saying, that when I'm consuming social media, that the algorithm is feeding me information that they think I'll like, or that they'll think aligns to my thinking. Whereas I'm purposely looking for challenging point of views. And I don't know if you've looked at the roster of people that we've had on the podcast so far, but I look out for people from all walks of life that are going to challenge my thinking. I don't want the person that's just going to come on the show and just give us, you know, a regurgitation of content. You know, the same content that we had last week is the same content we have next week. I'm always looking for something new. What are your thoughts about that, about killing diversity of thought?
I mean, we live, and again, I'm from an American perspective, democracy cannot survive without diverse thought. I mean, it is the most critical, one of the most critical components of a good democracy is that we allow diverse viewpoints, and we allow the minority to have a seat at the table and say, hey, here's what I think. That is so dangerous. But not only we're seeing that in other countries as well. You know, you talk about what happened with the Rohingya Muslims. Some countries in, you know, Africa. You talk about what's going on with the Uyghurs in China right now. I mean, when you do not allow diverse thought, and when a majority population consumes a minority population, what you have is genocide. What you have is violence. What you have is people being subservient to the majority, and that is terrible and dangerous, and that is scary for me as a man who grew up in a democracy, and not to say I'm proud to be an American or anything like that, but I do appreciate the freedoms that I have in this country. We're not a perfect country by any means, and I will argue with anybody who says we are, but I would say that we have freedoms in this country that others do not have, and I'm so grateful for that. And a lot of that is because we allow those diverse viewpoints.
So let's come back now to the societal impact, because we've spoken about the personal one. Now I want to talk about the societal bias. So when the algorithm is just picking up my own personal preferences, that's one thing. It's not a good thing, but that's one thing. The other one that I want to talk about is the concept of a trending video, where the algorithm is picking up the collective, and then they're feeding views to people or videos to people that they believe that everyone will like because it's trending at the moment. What is your view about that, and how that might impact social bias?
I think you're right in the way it could it could create that crowd where you do see that, especially as maybe a toxic video or a violent. I mean, you see those videos occasionally that will come up and it will incite riots. The something will occur, a video will, some misinformation will come up. And I think in many ways that was what happened. Is it Burma, with the Rohingya Muslims, is that there were some videos that rose and kind of went viral, and it led to violence because people were so upset by it that they went out into the streets and created violence. And in many ways, you're having a modern day example of what happened here 100 years ago here in Oklahoma with the Tulsa race massacres, where there was an incident where a young black man and a young white woman, I mean, they interacted and people got upset by it. And then, they burned down this thriving part of Tulsa, and it became this giant massacre. And that's because you're fueling the flames, and then you put up a video like that, and it just causes violence. So, and in many ways, the danger there is the danger of the crowd. And when there is a majority that is angry, and then a video sets them off. If I'm answering your question correctly.
You are, and at the extreme level, and it's something for us all to be aware of. That the ones that you're talking about are very visible. What I'd like to explore with you is the danger of the ones that are less conscious or subconscious or unconscious bias. You did reference the work of Sophia Umoja-Noble, for example, in relation to how perhaps unconscious bias might lead to a proliferation or an amplification of prejudice.
Yeah. There's, to me, I highlighted one of the great, and I really wanted to highlight her work and the work of Joy Baumwini, because I don't think people in the space, especially women of color, get enough. And those two, especially Joy, but also Sophia. But I mean, the work Joy has done in the space, she pretty much pulled the lid off algorithmic bias through her work, seeing that facial analysis algorithms misidentify darker skinned women many times more than lighter skinned men. I mean, that was like a aha moment, like, oh my goodness, we have a problem here. But so there's two things, there's algorithmic error, which is, so we're feeding the algorithm bad data or dirty data. So it's making bad decisions, or it doesn't have enough information. So in the facial analysis algorithms, it doesn't have enough pictures of darker skinned women. So it's misidentifying or darker skinned people. So it's misidentifying those people. So that's one side of the coin. And the other side of the coin is when the algorithms are feeding on our existing biases, and then they're enhancing those biases. So that one example is the confirmation bias, the echo chamber. We already have a bias. I'm a Republican, or I'm a Democrat, or, I believe this, and I'm just reinforcing that existing bias that I already have. But in many ways, when you talk about the example I gave with Google, it's that, Robert Downey Jr., famous actor, he's what you see on Robert Downey Jr. is all about his work in film. But Scarlett Johansson, who's in the same Avengers movies, all you see is stuff about her looks, her appearance, and that is a bias. That is a bias that we have as a society, whether it's fueled by men or whatever. That bias exists. It existed, before technology existed. When you look at the women's magazines and the scantily clad supermodels, and so those biases existed, but now technology is reinforcing them and enhancing them. And the danger is that so much of our information today comes from Google. So much of what we get comes from Google. When we need an answer to a question, what do? The first thing we do is we go to Google and we find out the answer to that question. So the first thing, the content that pops up when we ask that question, that's really critical today, and can really have a major impact on the way we view the world.